This is the DallasCowboys.com Draft Show. Your war room for insider news and draft analysis from deep within the confines of Cowboys headquarters at the Star in Frisco.
The Dallas Cowboys select T.D. Lamb, wide receiver.
Oh, they took him! Now, your host, Kyle Yeomans.
Oh, we are so close to the 2021 NFL Draft as we are just over 24 hours. Hey, you may be listening to this show, and it may be under 24 hours from the NFL Draft in Cleveland, Ohio, but we are just around the corner, and we are here as the DallasCowboys.com Draft Show on a special Wednesday edition to give you a roadmap to the 2021 NFL Draft, and that's the purpose of this show specifically is you could have watched all 40 of our shows previously, or this could be the first show that you listen to, but you're going to know what's going on this weekend. It's going to be a fun time. We've got Brian Broaddus, Jeff Kavanaugh. Bucky Brooks is on his way. He's got some TV duties to take care of early on, but Bucky will be here in just a couple of moments. But Brian, I mean, it's right around the corner. Is it nervous time yet? We talked about it I think it was maybe last week, about how you start getting into that nervous feel of the draft, but is it there yet? Are those butterflies there?
Yeah, I think right now for the guys that it's a time where you become very reflective at this moment. You know, you might sit in your office or kind of go back through your notes one more time. Maybe did you make a good enough point about a player to get him in the right spot? I know for a fact the pro guys are on the phone working with the other teams. You want to make sure that you check with them, say, hey, listen, we're open for business. If you guys want to come see us, we're interested in dropping down. You're just trying to throw some chum in the water right now and see who could come up, who could go back. But it's a very reflective time because, like I said, I used to sit there myself and just look at the board, and you just want to look at all those names and you kind of visualize how this thing is going to come off. And if you can kind of get that in your mind, it'll better help you to when players start coming off and knowing where you need to be to get the player you want.
Jeff, have you taken an extra look at your notes? Have you decided to maybe put Ardarius Washington, the safety from TCU, up a couple more spots heading into tomorrow?
There's nowhere to go for Ardarius. You can't get any higher than safety one, so there's nowhere for my tiny man to go. My tiny man is right where he's going to be. And I tell you, that is the only part of it that is a little bit nerve-wracking, is when the way that you feel about a player is not the way that basically the rest of the world feels about a player. And you're just watching to see this play out where you're like, yep, smallest safety ever, giant outlier. The whole world's going to factor that in and pick him in the 5th round. And are you going to be that one guy that stands there and goes, no, I believe, and I am. I believe that we will win. Ardarius and I, of course, yes.
You know what? I think what's really interesting about what Jeff has done, and I really do appreciate this about him, is the fact that you really don't want to get influenced. And we do get influenced. I'm not going to lie about that. There's certain things that happen that you read, you see, you hear. I mean, I was out this morning. I talked to 3 different teams walking around, and you talk about, hearing different approaches and stuff like that. But if you're one of those scouts that can put all that aside and have the belief that that player is going to be the best player, then I think that's a great trait and a great skill to have.
Do you think that scouts nowadays, especially with all the technology and the easy of communication and just how simple it is to have that input maybe invade your war room, do you think it's harder nowadays for these scouts and these front offices to avoid being influenced on guys like Ardarius Washington?
Well, I know I could speak for experience really quickly here. The fact that the scouts have not been able to travel to these schools, because what happens is you might have 5 scouts at a particular school, and they travel from place to place with each other, and they see each other at these schools, and they talk. They talk about, hey, I saw this kid at Missouri. I saw this kid at TCU. I saw this kid. And you can get influenced by talking to your friends, guys you trust, gals you trust. You can get influenced by, man, what am I not seeing in this guy? Or what are they not seeing? And the fact that the scouts did not travel together this year, might make for some interesting selections. We're a little bit more of a pure Jeff Kavanaugh approach.
I like it. I think it's something that we'll look at
approach.
Moving in. What was that?
It's the ideal approach. The Jeff Kavanaugh approach is probably the best way to draft. Everybody knows that.
I'm sure the board across the hallway in the war room probably says the exact same thing that you have on yours, just because it's the Jeff Kavanaugh approach. I kind of wanted to set the stage here, though, and going off of what Brian just said specifically about how there are going to be those conversations this year, and it's such a unique draft process with no combine, only the pro days to go by, and then even then, scouts were really unable to travel to as many pro days and to hit as many schools as you normally would. But this is going to be an interesting draft where really a lot of us don't know what's going on. And Jeff, I know specifically we've been talking about this for quite some time, but whenever tomorrow night rolls around, just how many surprises are going to be on that first round board and then heading into the second, because we just don't necessarily know what these front offices are thinking, or maybe even the front offices don't know exactly what they're thinking.
Yeah, I think there will be plenty of surprises. I wonder what it'll mean for movement in terms of how many teams are going to move around in the round. But, yeah, I think we'll get plenty. Like, there will be names that we haven't mentioned too often as first-rounders, I think, that pop up as first-rounders because it happens every year. And now when you add in what Brian is talking about, where you don't have – because I know what Brian was doing when he was a scout. Brian was over there hobnobbing and gossiping. Hey, what do you think about that LSU kid? And people are out there getting influenced, and now I think it's pretty pure. And I also think when Jerry mentioned at the presser that, these scouts haven't seen these players as much as usual, so it's not just that you're not influenced. It's also that, like in this organization, and every organization is different, but in this one, Jerry Jones is going to listen to a lot of different people. And how much is he going to listen to his coaches, considering that his scouts, he may not have as good a feeling on players because they haven't been around them as much. So I think every organization is going to be different. And I think we'll hear probably 4 or 5 names that you go, oh, okay, in the first round, and we'll see how it plays out. But the hay's in the barn, baby. Butterflies, get the butterflies out of here. It's party time. This is go time.
Well, I think the thing and where Jeff is right about this is that there's people out there right now that are telling me that this is not a traditional draft. And when they talk about traditional drafts, it's like defensive tackles, defensive ends. We've had receivers up there. You have all these quarterbacks up there. This is just not a traditional way it's going to go. And I totally agree. Everybody believes that they're going to be those wow picks that are going to happen. And, and we need to be ready for that. I talked to a guy this morning, too, that was doing a mock draft where he'd thrown up his hands. He's like, listen, I'm going to miss the 3rd pick at San Francisco. It's going to be completely wrong. And I'm like going, do a mock draft where you just trade everybody. I go, if you have some type of, you have a better chance of talking about moving around and grabbing players, and maybe being right as you do saying what San Francisco is going to do at 3, what Atlanta is going to do at 4, what Detroit's going to do at 7. You have a better chance of just kind of talking about chaos, potential chaos, as you do to picking that thing chalk and being somewhat right.
Oh, and I love that conversation because we started to have it yesterday, Brian, on our second round mock draft, which, by the way, we did a first round and second mock draft. Just for those of you at home who have not listened to that yet, you can go back on iTunes and listen to it. But you mentioned the crossroads yesterday, and there are a ton of crossroads that could happen at the 3rd pick and the 4th pick of this draft because you've got the Jaguars and the Jets. That's pretty much going to be chalk, or at least we think so. Trevor Lawrence to the Jags, and then we have Zach Wilson pretty much chalked in there with the Jets. If that's the case, that's the case. If not, then even 2 could be a crossroads. But then the 49ers, where are they going to go at quarterback? Is it going to be Trey Lance, Justin Fields, or is it going to be Mac Jones? Following that pick, where do the Falcons go? Kyle Pitts is then in the conversation along with 2 other quarterbacks. But this is a draft, Brian, because of the non-traditional side of it, could go completely different directions than those that the media are even talking about, or different directions from front offices are even thinking about.
Yeah, teams are preparing a couple different scenarios. If Kyle Pitts is taken at 4, the draft is going to go one direction, they feel. if Atlanta takes a quarterback, the draft is going in a whole nother different direction. So this is unique. Usually when you get to the top of a board, you could maybe get the first 5 or 6 picks in a row and have an idea of, okay, this is how this thing is going to play out. I think if you're a Cowboy fan, you're looking at this and you're saying, okay, if Dallas is locked in on taking a corner, if that's the direction that they're going to go, they're in a little bit of a bind because, again, I've talked to 8 different people yesterday and around the league that all believe that Surtain is going to be the pick. But they couldn't guarantee that Surtain was going to be there for me. They were saying, hey, if Surtain's there, but they also believe that J.C. Horn is a possibility too. But they don't believe that Horn is going to be there, and that's why they gave the Cowboys Surtain. So, the Cowboys are a little bit maybe of the mercy of the board. What happens at Detroit at 7? Could they move? What happens at Carolina at 8? Mm-hmm. And, I'm kind of thinking Denver's going to stand there and pick. But there's some teams that can back out of there that can really affect the way the Cowboys could possibly lose maybe both their guys that they wanted to, and then that would take them into a whole nother direction.
Jeff, go ahead and outline that worst-case scenario. What would it take for the Cowboys to be wiped out at 10 if, let's say, both Horn and Surtain are off the board whenever their pick comes around?
Well, and this is based on how I see the players and not necessarily the Cowboys, because I'm not even sure on how the Cowboys are viewing this. When Jerry yesterday said that they viewed the opt-outs as compromised, I was like, well, I don't. Like Penei Sewell and Rashawn Slater, those are guys that I'm incredibly interested in. So, my scenario where I think that you're wiped out of the guys that I would really like to pick at 10 is Patrick Surtain and J.C. Horn are gone, Penei Sewell and Rashawn Slater are gone, Kyle Pitts is gone. So you lose those 5, and then you put 4 other quarterbacks in, and now you're on the clock. But it really, no matter how it goes, it opens up a different opportunity that maybe the fan base would be weirded out by. But, I would just look at it and be like, oh, man, this is very strange. The best players available all play wide receiver. What are we going to do? Are we going to take Jamar Chase or Jalen Waddle here? Which I would, because they're the best players. But it also opens up the possibility that somebody's calling for the 5th quarterback and you can move down. But that is, I think, the wipeout scenario is you lose both top corners, both top offensive linemen, and Kyle Pitts.
How likely is that scenario, Brian?
Well, I tell you what, just talking to folks around the league, there's a lot of love for Horn and there's a lot of love for Surtain. And, we Jeff talked about those quarterbacks. We all love Pitts as a player. He's right that if you get a situation where Carolina say Carolina takes say that Philadelphia gets to Detroit at 7 and they end up taking Surtain, and then you turn around and then all of a sudden Carolina takes Horn, who they absolutely love. I know that for a fact, coming from their war room. Mm-hmm. You're in trouble right now. That's trouble for you if, in fact, that you're holding on both those corners. So, you got to hope that maybe one of those offensive linemen would be there if that's the case. Or would they take Parsons? That probably would be, I think, the case. I get the hint. The only player on their board, again, this has gone back and forth. You hear so much positivity about Sewell, and I'm hearing that Sewell is the only guy. And I heard last week that they really liked Slater, but Sewell seems to be now the only offensive guy on that board other than Pitts that they would take over maybe one of those corners if they were on the board.
What would you do on your board? Because I know you're pretty high on Slater as well, and of course Sewell not likely to fall. He could go either to 5 at Cincinnati or to the Dolphins at 6. He could go either one of those, and then a slew of teams behind there in between them and the Cowboys. But where would you rank those guys if you had your 5 picks? And I'll ask Jeff to follow up with his 5 as well.
Well, I think the way I would. Are you talking about me, or do I, how I think it's going to roll out?
I want your picks.
Yeah, me personally though, the top 5 players I have on my board, I've got, because I've ranked them from 1 to 190. Mm-hmm. I have Lawrence, Pitts, Sewell, Chase, and Fields as my top 5 guys. But is it going to go that? I mean, no. I mean, you think about the teams and stuff like that. But me personally, like I said, I'm totally on board with, if they get in a situation where that they have to take Parsons, I understand that. But me personally, Lawrence, Pitts, Sewell, Chase, Fields, those would be my top 5 guys in my rankings right now.
If you're trying to put, Kyle, I think you want in order the 5 non-quarterbacks
sure,
and how you
that'll
want
work.
to pick them at 10.
I'm cool with that.
Okay, because like the way that I would order the guys that I'm interested in for the Cowboys is Kyle Pitts 1, Rashawn Slater 2, Penei Sewell 3, and then J.C. Horn 4, Patrick Surtain 5. So I think the Cowboys want it to work out where one of those corners make it, but one of those corners will be the 4th and 5th options for me. I really like the offensive players in this draft above those corners.
And Jerry even talked about it yesterday. Don't be stupid with your needs. I mean, that was one of the biggest quotations taken out of the entire pre-draft press conference, which, by the way, you can listen to on DallasCowboys.com. But he talked about it. Don't be stupid with your needs. Take what's there. Take what the board lets you do. And Brian, you've been very adamant about this in past drafts and from things that I've heard from you in the past about just let the board fall to you. If the board falls to the Cowboys, there's a very good chance that there's an offensive player available or Micah Parsons and not necessarily these corners. Where would you go if that's the case, and why is Micah Parsons just kind of an afterthought at this point?
Well, I think that there's questions you have to ask about Micah Parsons is the character stuff, the off-the-field stuff. If you're comfortable with his story, if you're comfortable with talking with Penn State people, if you're comfortable with visiting this guy, you got to make sure that this player, the ability, there's no question about the ability. You just got to make sure that you're totally comfortable with, is this the type of player, as we're trying to rebuild culture and stuff like that in the locker room, that we really want to have in there? Are there immaturity questions? If that's the case and all that, I don't think you want the player. I think Jeff's absolutely right about this. To me, the offensive side of the board is, at least in the first round, is clearly better than what's going on. And if I know I have 9 other picks that I could potentially make, taking an offensive player at 10 is not a terrible idea, and I appreciate Jerry saying yesterday, hey, don't get caught up in the needs and all that stuff. Keep an open mind about that, and I appreciate that about it.
Jeff?
So who you would take in that kind of wipeout scenario?
No, not even that. I'm more of talking about Micah Parsons here, and why would you rather take an offensive player than Micah Parsons outside of the fact that he does fit a semi-need for you at the Cowboys at this point?
Well, to me, it is because we're making exceptions for certain players here. Because to me, you factor in positional value in the NFL, and linebacker exists somewhere in the same sphere as running back and tight end and safety, somewhere towards the bottom of the totem pole. And I make an exception for Kyle Pitts because I think Kyle Pitts is an incredibly clean prospect with so much superstar potential that's literally getting better and better. With Micah Parsons, when I go, okay, Kyle Pitts, I'll make an exception for, even though it's not a, quote, valuable position, because I think it's a unique opportunity to become one of 3 teams in the NFL that's a mismatch nightmare, along with San Francisco and Kansas City, with Kelsey and Kittle. With Micah Parsons at a lower value position, then you throw in question marks, then you throw in the opt-out, so I haven't seen the growth as a player. It's just enough there that I want nothing to do with that position at number 10 overall. So, I'll make an exception for a, quote, not valuable position and be comfortable with that risk. I wouldn't do it with Parsons.
Would there be another?
Yeah, the thing that I was told well, let me just real quick, Kyle. The thing that's interesting about Pitts is, and this I think was the best. I had a guy in the league explain this to me about Pitts, and we all love Pitts, but think of Pitts this way. This guy said to me, he's like, listen, Pitts is the type of weapon that we all now fear at quarterback, of a quarterback that can run and throw. Pitts scores points. He goes, defenses fear the quarterback that can run and throw. That makes defenses have to play a totally different style. Pitts is one of those guys that has that ability. If you fear the quarterback that can run or throw, you should also fear a type of player like Pitts who could come in, could score, and put your defense in a lot of stress.
I was specifically about Kyle Pitts. There's not necessarily a huge chance that he falls, but you're talking about the exception to the rule, and I completely agree with what Jeff just said a moment ago, but Micah Parsons is not that exception to the rule. Are there any other guys in this draft outside of Kyle Pitts or maybe Micah Parsons that could be considered in that category with maybe an edge rusher or a defensive tackle?
No. Edge rushers, because to me, when we're talking about exceptions, we're talking about the, quote, lower positional value ones.
True.
And so, no, they don't exist. Like, there's not an Aaron Donald type at defensive tackle. Edge is different because that is a premium position, but the players just aren't there. Trying to put those players in order is such a challenge. My top edge guy is Azeez Ojulari out of Georgia, and now there's Scuttlebutt out there and Rumarewski's out there that maybe he's getting flagged medically on a leg, on a knee. Jalen Phillips, Miami pass rusher, is my second best edge rusher. He's going to be medically flagged in multiple ways. Yeah. So there's not a clean edge prospect. There's not a defensive tackle that belongs up there. There's not a safety that belongs up there unless you're calling Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah safety. It's such a bizarro class, and I love it.
Yeah, let me throw another thing out there, too. People are talking about Barmore at Alabama as a guy that needs to be babysit. So all of a sudden, you're in a situation now where Alabama does a great job of making sure that their players are taken care of, they get the class and all that stuff. But I was hearing some talk last night that, listen, you really have to babysit Barmore to get him to do things. That's something I don't want to hear. So, yeah, all these defensive guys at the top of the board, there's something that there's that one flag that makes you think, well, heck, maybe I need to take this offensive guy and then figure out everything at 44 and 75 and the other picks that you have.
And that, Kyle, is the appeal of Patrick Surtain to the Cowboys and so many other teams. Lack of questions.
Yeah.
That is the massive appeal of Patrick Surtain.
And you add that to the athleticism, you add that to the tape. There's a lot of reasons why Patrick Surtain at 10 makes a ton of sense. He's a top 10 caliber corner, just bar none. And then you add in the fact that there are no question marks. I think that's what's exciting about it overall. I completely agree with what you just said. Now, the Cowboys do have 10 picks outside of top 10 questions, as like we've talked about really throughout this entire first segment, but we will hit some of those coming up later on in the show. When we come back, it's Twitter on the 20. Could the Cowboys drop back in the draft? And if they do, could they still be targeting a specific corner? We'll talk about that when we return on the DallasCowboys.com draft show.
Something happens when we can't be our true selves. You can hear it in our laughs. There's the half-hearted chuckle. The courtesy conference caller.
Yeah, great.
And of course, the I'm only laughing because I'm dating your daughter.
Oh, that's so true.
If you want to laugh for real, try having some Miller Lite with some friends. It works. It's Miller time. Celebrate responsibly. 2021 Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin beer.
Before there was a draft, you could size up a cowboy by 3 simple factors: the crease in his hat, the bend of his brim, and his unbending attitude. A man Stetson didn't just protect him from what life threw at him, it projected a rugged, unstoppable spirit. Stetson hats are still American-made with pride right here in Texas. They're still the unofficial crown of all self-respecting cowboys, and Stetson is proud to be on the field with America's team. Find a retailer nearest you at stetson.com/cowboys.
Hey, Cowboy fans, if you're thinking about attending a game this season, visit cowboystravel.com to book your travel package today. Stay at the team hotel, have dinner with a Cowboys legend, and experience the best sports venue in the world, AT&T Stadium. Also, tour the Star, get autographs from your favorite players, and talk X's and O's with me, Mickey Spagnola. The official travel partner of the Dallas Cowboys will take care of all your travel needs. Visit cowboystravel.com to book your package today.
Honey, big news.
Gary, are you okay?
Oh, I'm not Gary anymore. I'm Jackie Flash.
What?
See, I want the latest smartphone, but the best deals are only for new customers. So, to get a new customer deal, I changed my name to Jackie Flash.
Okay, but the best smartphone deals at AT&T are for everyone, new and existing customers.
That's huge. Then guess who's getting a deal?
Is it Jackie Flash?
Jackie Flash.
It's not complicated. At AT&T, our best smartphone deals are for everyone. Restrictions apply. Visit att.com for details.
This is the DallasCowboys.com Draft Show.
Back here on the DallasCowboys.com Draft Show, Kyle Yeomans, Jeff Kavanaugh, Brian Broaddus. We will soon have Bucky Brooks joining us at any waking moment from his NFL Network duties. But before he does, we've got to get into some Twitter on the 20.
On the 20.
There it is. Okay, I had to wait a little bit longer that time. That's okay. Chris Beam has got a lot going on in the back. He's the one doing the graphics. He's doing Chris. The videos. He's doing the sounders. He's doing everything. So, huge shout out to Chris Beam running the show in the back. The first question is the one that I teased with heading into the break, and this comes from JD on Twitter. And JD says, if cornerbacks fall off the board in front of you, kind of like how we talked about in that first segment, could you move back to 15 or even a little bit later in the draft? And if they do, could the Cowboys take a guy like Greg Newsome II out of Northwestern, or would they completely pivot to a completely new position? Jeff, we'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, I think that's what you build the board for, you know? That's what Brian's going to have his top 190 in order for. Is my initial thought at pick number 10 is that we're looking at somebody like J.C. Horn or Patrick Surtain or Rashawn Slater or Penei Sewell or Kyle Pitts. Then, if you got to number 10 and that's not available, which I don't think will happen because I think Jamar Chase is going somewhere, so one of those guys will be there. But in the scenario where they're not and you can find a way to move back, Captain Trade Down loves to ride. Nothing makes me happier than acquiring more top 50 picks. So if you moved back to 15, you just shift down your board a few spots and you go, okay, I am looking at Jalen Waddle and Jamar Chase and Devontae Smith. I've got 3 receivers that I really like still. I am looking at Elijah Vera Tucker, the USC offensive lineman. I am looking at Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, the Notre Dame linebacker / safety. And I am looking at Greg Newsome. I'm just following my grades down the board. So I'm looking at, I've still got a crop of guys that I like. 3 receivers, an O-lineman, a linebacker / safety, and 1 corner. So yeah, I could work my way down the board that way and still have my targets in mind.
Yeah, you absolutely can. And I think that if you even there, I have a couple of different pockets of on my board, I know, and I'm sure the Cowboys kind of in that same realm. You know, where's Farley going to fall? We talk about Newsome, Samuel, Joseph, Stokes. I mean, I could just keep naming cornerbacks if you want. You know, if you back up and you get to where you're at 15, you're at 18, you're at 21, I still think you could grab a cornerback if that's the case. If you're really looking for a linebacker, that kid at Kentucky, that Jamin Davis, I'm just telling you, if you back up and you get him, that'll make you feel good about your prospects at linebacker if you're interested. We talked about Bolton was another guy at Missouri. There will be names on that board if they back up that they will feel comfortable with, and that's the reason why you would go back if you have that pockets of names that you could grab one of those guys from.
I feel like you have to be comfortable with a certain amount of guys there. I mean, it depends on how far back you go. If there's 7 guys, you could go back 10 picks and feel pretty good about where you're going to fall. If you only feel good about 2 guys, then you might as well stay put and pick between the 2 of them, and there's a good chance that either one of those things ends up happening, Brian.
Yeah, if you get Surtain or Horn on that board when you're up at 10, you need to make that pick.
Make the pick.
That needs to make your pick. And if not, then and you can find a way to back up and you have all those names that I just talked about, Jeff just talked about, you'll be just fine doing that too.
You know, and it's funny that this is kind of the topic that we've led into, because this is a great question from Todd Mack, and it's directly addressed to Brian. He said, what was it about DeMarcus Ware that had scouts pounding the table against Parcells and his coaching staff against Merriman? And do you see anything similar happening in this great debate that we've had throughout the draft process between J.C. Horn and Patrick Surtain?
Well, it's not, and this is something that I was told, and I know when Jeff and I do radio every afternoon from 2 to 7 on 105.3 The Fan, when we talk about this stuff, it is like, okay, scouts lined up here, coaches lined up here. I was told, a guy said, hey, listen, I heard what you're talking about there. He goes, to be honest with you, we've got some coaches that like Surtain. We've got some scouts that like Horn. So it's not completely coaches versus scouts in their room right now. They're going to have to come to a consensus right there. The thing with Ware was Ware was one of those guys, it's cliche to say, he just checked off all the boxes. When we started talking about the clean player, the player with the ability, the ceilings and the floors, all those things that everybody likes to talk about, Ware was that guy. Every scout that was banging the table for him were just like, listen, this guy's the character, the traits, the ability, his best is ahead of him. And Parcells saw like Merriman more of a ready player now. This is my guy now, but he had more character questions. So there you go. Coaches sometimes, they don't care about the character. Coaches care about the player. And scouts are like, well, give me the clean player that is going to not bust, and we're not going to have to worry about him. So
not every scout, Brian. You were a scout, and I know darn well you didn't need him to be a clean player. You're like, he's good at football. The end.
I tend to go, I'm just telling scouts in general, I tend to go to give me the guy that I feel like is the best player. And to me, I saw what the scouts, I was working at pro personnel for the Cowboys in 2005. I saw what the scouts saw watching that Troy tape. I'm like, okay, that's it. I get it. I see why guys are fighting for this particular player.
I love that conversation. I really do, because there's going to be crossroads like we've talked about with picks ahead of the Cowboys, but the Cowboys are going to have crossroads whenever 10 rolls around, because you can improve this team in a number of different directions, and it's not just 2 paths on those crossroads. We're talking about like 15 different paths that you could potentially go, and that's what makes things interesting whenever Thursday night rolls around. So sticking with Thursday night before we move on to a later draft question, but Troy asked, should we want, as the Dallas Cowboys, 5 quarterbacks to go in the top 9 so you have more options to pick at 10, or would you want one of those quarterbacks like Mac Jones or Trey Lance to fall to 10 so that way you can have a trade back scenario and load up on picks? Jeff, I know you're Mr. Captain Trade Down, so I'll let Brian add to this question first.
Yeah, I'd rather all the quarterbacks be there and then let me pick the guy I want at 10. And then if I want to move around in the second or third or fourth round, that's where I want to move around. I feel like that if you give me the opportunity to take the best defensive players on my board, then I'm going to take that opportunity. So give me all 5 quarterbacks being gone.
This guy Brian. I can take Kyle. I got to tell you, Kyle. I want all the receivers to go, tight ends, the offensive line, like push both the corners down, but leave me one quarterback. Let me flip back, because I do have a wild dream. And my wild dream is, can I find a way to get Horn or Surtain to 15?
Ooh.
You know what I'm saying? Add a pick and but it's not realistic. So Brian has the right answer and the smart answer. But as a man with a brand of Captain Trade Down, I would like to have something there that gives me that ability if I want to do it. But the smarter play is get 5 quarterbacks out of here and send either Sewell or Pitts or my corners, send them on down here, and let's go ahead and make a good pick.
Well, what if you were in a situation, what if you were at the mercy, the 5th quarterback that gets to you is the one that nobody wants? That's the thing I would worry about if it was me. If it's not the right guy. Now, if it ends up being Lance or our Ohio State kid Fields, somebody will probably want that guy. But is somebody going to want to trade up for Mac Jones if Mac Jones somehow gets down, to you at 10? I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I think some teams would say, listen, if he got to us, we'd be happy to take him. But I don't know if anybody's willing to put the draft capital ahead to go for a guy if you have the wrong quarterback sitting there at 10 for you.
And Jeff, you said it.
You guys,
go for it, Jeff.
I need to get this. I need to get this in, Kyle. I got to find a suit jacket. Kyle's got the nice button-up on. Bucky is swinging in fully suited and ready for draft war here. I got to find something with a collar. I got to do something here.
Hey, Bucky, where's your tie? I need you to put that tie on, man. Well, I mean, I can't have. I need to. If you got a button, you might as well be wearing a tie right now.
No, I'm just sitting here trying to make do, trying to figure it all out. Just trying to figure it all out. I want to get in on the conversation because I know you guys are doing all kinds of crazy conversation and chatter. So I just want to make sure that I at least got in on the conversation to see if I could add some levity to it.
Add some levity to it. Okay, I'll ask you the same question that Troy asked us here on Twitter on the 20. He said, should we want 5 quarterbacks in the top 9, or would you rather have one of those quarterbacks fall to you so that way you have trade options as opposed to having just more players to pick from, specifically if you're the Dallas Cowboys at 10?
No, get all the quarterbacks out of the way because then it means a good player is going to be sitting there for you at 10. Like trading out or whatever is nice in terms of picking picks and getting picks or whatever, but I'd rather get the player. And so if those quarterbacks go early, because some of those guys are going to be overdrafted, the board is going to be wide open. Whether it's an offensive tackle, whether it's one of the corners that you want, no one wants the linebacker, but all of that will be sitting there. So then you have more options.
I like it. And Jeff, you said specifically in your answer to that question that it's unlikely that J.C. Horn or Patrick Surtain falls to 15. I mean, we did a mock draft 2 days ago, and in that mock draft, he fell to 16 in the Cardinals. So I don't think it's necessarily out of the question. Sure, it's unlikely, but it definitely could happen with the way that things line up. I think J.C. Horn's too good of a player to fall to 16. But, hey, if all 5 quarterbacks go, if some of those wide receivers go on a run, it's not out of the question that this is that J.C. Horn could fall even in a trade-back scenario. So, Bucky, it's great timing that you popped on this show because I had this question teed up, and just so happens that you popped on just in time. So, Kenny Swisher asked this question on Twitter. He said, I have 2 questions, but the first one is, with Keona Neal on the contract, a short contract as a safety/linebacker hybrid, how would you rate Chaz Surratt, the linebacker out of North Carolina, as a long-term option in that spot? So, Bucky, I'll let you start off with your Tar Heel, a guy you talked about whenever the Senior Bowl rolled around.
No, I think in the second or third round, I think Chaz Surratt could be in play. When you look at his game and you look at the athleticism and what he brings to the table, he would qualify, he would fit. The big thing is he's only played linebacker for a little over a year, 2 years of experience. He's fast and dynamic and athletic, but there's still going to be some growing pains when it comes to him with some of the reads and those things. That's it. He is going to add athleticism and speed to the second level. And when we think about being a nickel 70% of the game, he is a better option to be on the field than Jalen Smith being on the field down in, down out against those teams that pass a lot.
Wow, Chaz Surratt is a better option than Jalen Smith in nickel formations, Brian. I mean, that because he can cover, that makes a lot of sense. What do you think about Chaz Surratt and what he could fit into that role?
Yeah, I think the thing with Serrata, and I have to give the kid a lot of credit, and I want to give the North Carolina program a lot of credit. I know Bucky, I bust on Bucky a lot about North Carolina, but I really do it out of respect. And, this guy is going to be, to me, when I watch him play, I see a really good athlete, but I see a guy that needs to play on the move. If you watch the Virginia Tech game, they got bodies on him. And that bothered me a little bit. But he's going to have to learn. He's going to have to learn how to play with his hands, how to disengage, how to quickly see and go and read and all that. But I will say this, though. You can watch him, just like Bucky was talking about. You can watch him in the Clemson game play offhand, knock the ball away, be in coverage. Jeff's talked about that a bunch, too. We've talked about it with Cox. Give me the guys that can cover. I'll teach them to play the run, and then we'll worry about those other things later. But if you can cover, that's a great trait to have. Serrata could be that kind of guy there. We will need to work on playing the run a little bit.
Jeff?
I mean, that's the
it's really interesting. I think with him, it's one of those guys that on tape I sort of struggled with him. Like, you can definitely see the athleticism, but I think there's also a rawness to his ability to play linebacker, which makes sense because I believe he's only played it for 2 years of his entire life. So to me, that is a guy where it's just a matter of, I think every team is going to like him on some level. It's just a matter of where do you project that you would pick him, because I think there's some development that you've got to do there. So it's just a matter of where do you pull the trigger on that. And for me, he's more of a 3rd or 4th round guy than he is any earlier than that. But I think he is, that athleticism, a guy who's a former quarterback. So you think, you've got this football intelligence, you've got the athletic ability, you've got some ability in coverage, and we can keep growing that. And if he's a special teams guy, then I think that's a dude that brings value to a football team.
Yeah, if I was going for a guy real quick, if I was going for a guy like that, an outside linebacker type of a coverage guy, I would, and not in the first round, Pete Warner from Ohio State is a guy that I would think that could play that type of role for you. Could be on the field for some run defense, but also can cover. He's a former strong safety, has some of those kinds of traits that you like.
Not a bad name. Not a bad name to bring up. It's funny because it's that tweener position that you're looking for, that hybrid safety linebacker that can make plays and stay on the field and passing downs. And so which guys offer that versatility? Because the Cowboys have to be a faster defense to be a better defense.
And maybe the fact that Serrata has only played the linebacker spot for a couple of years, and of course switching over from quarterback, that kind of adds to the fact that, well, he was instantly good at the position. I mean, he instantly moved over the linebacker, and he was an all-ACC caliber player. Does that mean that he's already hitting his ceiling, or does that mean he's got that longevity that where he can grow at the position? I tend to lean toward the second option, so that kind of intrigues me a little bit more. And this goes along with another question asked by Richard Perry on Twitter, and we'll round out the segment with this. But with Sean Lee retiring, how much emphasis does that add in maybe picking up a mid-round linebacker? It doesn't have to be Micah Parsons at 10 or Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. It could be one of these later-round linebackers, these day 2, day 3 guys that can make an impact. But Serrat's one of those names. Werner's one of those names. I know Nick Bolton has been thrown around. But are there other guys there, Bucky, that where you look at the linebacker spot, the Cowboys could certainly benefit?
Yeah, I think linebacker has to be a position that you look at, not only just because the uncertainty around LVE and what happens with the long-term contract, whether the 5th-year option or beyond, but just the way the game is evolving. You have to have speed and sideline-to-sideline playmakers. You have to do it. I am intrigued, though, because like Nick Bolton has kind of lost some of the momentum. People don't talk about him as much. Jamin Davis has kind of sucked up the air in the room when it comes to linebacker. But make no mistake, the Missouri kid can play. And, man, he makes a ton of plays. And so, I don't know. Like, linebackers are kind of like that one position that's hard to peg when it comes to where they're going to go. But I certainly would keep my eye on him because he's a difference maker.
Brian, he's talked about Nick Bolton and Jamin Davis. I mean, these are two guys kind of flip-flopping in that realm of players in that second round. Do you have any other guys there that the linebacker spot could definitely add to the room here in the Cowboys?
Yeah, I think that it don't focus on Sean Lee leaving. Focus on the fact, like Bucky says, Leighton Vander Esch and Jalen Smith did not play very well. And you don't worry about Sean Lee. Worry about your starting linebackers. That's a cause for concern even going forward right there. So, I want to. There's a couple of different guys that I want to talk about though that with. And it was interesting, and I don't know if my guys have had a chance to see any of these guys as well. The McGrone kid, from Cameron McGrone from Michigan would be a guy that I would like to talk about. I think Patrick Johnson, the kid from Tulane, is kind of a rush in, but maybe could be an outside linebacker for you, is right there. We mentioned like Jabril Cox and people like that. I know that's something, Monty Rice was a guy at Georgia of a name I threw out there during a mock draft that we did. But I just think there's some guys out there that are clearly, that those types of players that we really, really like, but they're not that top first round type guys. They're just really steady. They're athletic. They're hitters. They run well. If the Cowboys are looking for those guys that we just mentioned, that could be a real one of those picks you look back and say, oh man, they hit on a guy. They really hit on a guy with that. Film on a lot of those guys is really, really good.
Jeff?
Yeah, I think with linebackers in the NFL, I love what Bucky is saying about how important it is to have speed and coverability. And I think you have to be able to go one of two ways as a linebacker. Either you have that or you can rush the passer. So, I think that's why the name Zaven Collins was hot for a while to the Cowboys. If they did some weird moving around towards the end of the first round somewhere, the Tulsa linebacker, because I think he's a really good pass rusher. And then as you're going down your board and you're looking in later rounds, whether you're talking 3rd through 5th or 6th round, a couple of guys we haven't mentioned that, at least to me, are fairly interesting. Well, I mean, there's a lot of them, right? Baron Browning earlier in the draft, but as you get later on, I actually kind of like Derek Jones, linebacker out of Ernest Jones out of South Carolina. I think he's an interesting guy. And then if you're going full-blown developmental, there's a dude at Purdue named Derek Barnes.
Oh, that's the one. Yeah. There you go. That's a great one to mention. Yeah.
I think there's interesting players that can develop or step in and play a certain role anywhere from rounds like, I don't know, Ernest Jones, maybe he goes as high as the 3rd, maybe you're talking about the 4th, but as you're getting into day 3, I think there's still really interesting players at linebacker, at edge. I really like the depth of this draft. I don't love the top of it, but I like the depth of it.
I tell you, I love the fact that Jeff mentioned Derek Barnes, because he's in that group of that shorter linebacker when you watch him play. But I'll tell you what, this guy can close it down when he's trying to run down that ball. He's really good. If you get him in space, he makes a ton of plays. He's a wrap-up tackler. I mean, there's times where they used him off the edge as a rusher, and he was able to attack the pocket. So, yeah, if Dan Quinn playing with the shorter linebackers that can run, that Derek Barnes from Purdue is a really, really good name to keep an eye on.
Yeah, it's funny because I think you guys are talking about where do the Cowboys go fishing? Do they go fishing early, 1st or 2nd round, or are they willing to take a chance on the developmental player? The one thing that really will make it work, I want to see what Dan Quinn is going to do when it comes to his development program. When he was with the Falcons, they had a thing called the Plan D program, where 10 to 15 minutes after practice every day, the coaches would spend time with the young guys, developing them. You add that up over the course of a week, man, you talk about minutes upon minutes and hours upon hours of developing those guys so they could play the last 6 games of the season. Do the Cowboys begin to implement some of that? Because if they do, then I'm more confident in taking the developmental guy, because you're giving them the time and the attention to allow them to develop, instead of just giving it lip service and saying, oh, this is my late round guy, he's going to develop, but then we don't really give him a chance to develop.
We saw that last year with Reggie Robinson at the cornerback spot. Not necessarily a linebacker, but at corner, we said, hey, we're going to move him to safety. He was a 4th-round pick. He'll be fine. We're going to develop him, and then he sees one snap throughout the entire 2020 season. Very frustrating. Very frustrating for draft nerds out there who really liked Reggie Robinson coming out of Tulsa and what he could do at the corner spot. Hopefully he's back there in 2021. But you're right. If they're going to pick up a developmental linebacker, they're going to have to invest in that developmental linebacker, whether it's a guy like Derek Barnes out of Purdue or maybe a Pete Werner out of Ohio State. There are names there. You just got to pick them, and then you got to invest in them when that time comes around. Okay, we're going to take our second break. When we come back, final predictions. What will happen on Thursday and Friday as the NFL draft is closing in on just 24 hours away when we return here on the DallasCowboys.com Draft Show.
Smoothie King, we are blending goodness to fuel your greatness. Every blend is crafted to help you achieve your health and fitness goals. Smoothie King uses only whole fruits and organic veggies. You'll never find sugary syrups or artificial flavors, colors, or preservatives. And unlike some other smoothie places, there are 0 grams of added sugar in many of our blends. Smoothie King is proud to be the official smoothie of the Dallas Cowboys. Place your order in the app or online for pickup or delivery. Smoothie King, rule the day.
There are many ways to say Miller Lite has more taste and only 1 more calorie than Michelob Ultra. You could say it with your show choir buddies at your high school reunion.
Miller Lite is more taste and only 1 more calorie than Michelob Ultra.
However you say it, it's Miller time. Celebrate responsibly. 2021 Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Beer per 12 fluid ounces. Miller Lite, 96 calories, 3.2 carbs. Michelob Ultra, 95 calories, 2.6 carbs. Taste test performed by Institute for Perception, February 2018.
RV shoppers, you're invited to the DFW RV Party, presented by Funtown RV. May 20th through May 23rd. Live music, free parking, free admission, and hundreds of RVs. Come party with Funtown, Rowdy, and the Cowboy cheerleaders. To crank this party up a notch, we're offering huge discounts on RVs from top brands like Forest River, Heartland, and more. Plus, you'll find amazing door prices like stadium tours, camping grills, and the first 1,000 kids each day get a free fishing pole. It's all happening May 20th through May 23rd inside AT&T Stadium, home of the Dallas Cowboys. The DFW RV Party presented by Funtown RV. Visit DFWRVparty.com for details.
New Dr. Pepper Zero Sugar. You deserve it.
I do deserve that.
You deserve decadent flavor without sugar. And a day at the beach without sand getting everywhere. And a relaxing bath that your children don't interrupt.
I deserve all that?
It's really just a visual metaphor for Dr. Pepper Zero Sugar. Everything you want, nothing you don't.
A visual metaphor on the radio. I do deserve that.
Dr. Pepper Zero Sugar. The zero you deserve is finally here.
This is the DallasCowboys.com Draft Show.
Oh, I love the draft show. This is so much fun. Even in the middle of the break, we're laughing and cutting it up, and Bucky Brooks did not put on a tie. Instead, he actually took the jacket off, Jeff. He's getting loose as we get into the final 9 minutes of the draft show.
It's very Roger Goodell. From what if we had one more segment? I think Bucky would be shirtless. It was like Goodell started in a suit in his basement, and by the end of it, he had like a glass of whiskey and a cigar and an old dirty T-shirt on. I love it.
That was an all-timer last year. I mean, and that's the thing is we're going to have another all-time moment again this year, but we just don't know what it's going to be. That was the best one. Was by the time he was done, he was just kicking his feet up and just reading the draft picks from his chair, and then Dave Portnoy wins a dinner with him, and then it's just a whole mess after that. But we've got some predictions to make here on the draft show. These gentlemen will not be on our day one coverage of the NFL draft. Instead, you can catch Brian and Jeff on 105.3 The Fan. Brian, real quickly, just kind of go through what y'all's plans are for your draft coverage on Thursday. Of course, we will have our own draft coverage on Thursday, and then we will combine the two for a hodgepodge of draft insiderness on Friday and Saturday. But tell us what we could hear from on The Fan on Friday. Or Thursday.
It'll be Jeff trying to get the best wide receiver to the Cowboys at 10. That's what the whole show will be about. No, it's the coverage.
This offense with Jalen Waddle, bro.
Yeah,
wow.
There we go. Jeff will just Jeff will be but it'll be a lot like what's going on with .com. It's that we've studied these players. It's not just about the Cowboys. It's about all these players. We're going to talk about, what happens ahead of them at Detroit, what happens ahead at Atlanta. As you get past, we'll be able to kind of cover the first round like it needs to be covered. If there's surprises, if there's trade backs, if there's trade ups, we'll have all the strategy. We'll have the understanding of what's going on, and it will be the thing is we'll be able to tell you why this particular player went at this time to this team. So looking forward to another great weekend of coverage, not only on The Fan, but with our friends at DallasCowboys.com.
Oh, I'm super excited for all of it. I'm also excited to hear what they took him, what we hear in the open every show. What is the moment? What's the they took him moment that you were going to hear from Brian Broaddus this year?
When Kyle Pitts is there, when Kyle Pitts, when he's there, they took him. Yeah, but we'll know they're going to take him. They know they're going to take him. Mm-hmm. So I mean, what are we worried about?
Select.
Yeah.
Micah Parsons.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, they took
Yeah.
him. They took him.
Well, he could be good. He might be good. That could be okay.
I feel like
We'll be fine.
I feel
We'll
like
be fine.
Quiddy Pay would probably be, or like Aziz Ojolari.
Quiddy Pay would cause a big time disruption to our draft process. I think. Yeah.
I think there would be a collective 10 seconds of silence in this room, and then down the hall where you guys are, there will be another 10 seconds of silence in that room. And
let me tell you this. I've already got a folder with like the radio with like the higher ups for dropping an F-bomb on the radio, and I think if it happened again, if they drafted Quiddy Pay, I would have a second sheet of paper in that folder, and then I would probably lose my job because I now have 2 sheets of paper that saying I dropped an F-bomb on the air.
Oh, great. Yeah. I didn't know that first one even happened. I'm going to have to go find that somewhere. Okay. We've got 5 minutes.
And it was about a player. It was about a player. It was Paul Dawson from TCU. Guy asked me, he goes, "What do you think about Paul Dawson?" I go, "F Paul Dawson," and it went out on the air. So
because we were in a break, the guy back in the control room forgot to turn us off. It was
it was probably
it
zero.
Was unfortunate,
That's
but
probably what it was.
I was right. F Paul Dawson.
Oh gosh.
Man,
Goodness gracious. Sure. All right, final predictions. We've got 4 minutes left. Bucky, we'll start with you. Who will be the Dallas Cowboys selection at pick number 10?
Okay, so for so long, I've been saying that Pat Surtain is going to be the pick, right? And then I get reminded of this information from Rashawn Slater about the connection between Mike McCarthy and J.C. Horn's dad, Joe Horn. Joe Horn was the wide receiver in New Orleans when Mike McCarthy was there. He also was a player on Kansas City when I was there, and Mike McCarthy was a quarterback coach. And then they're talking about the connection with Dan Quinn and Milt Muschamp. So at 10, J.C. Horn is going to be the pick if he's on the board because of the familiarity and the relationship business. J.C. Horn, Cowboys.
There you go. I see, and people may be a little disappointed in this. I think this is the better pick in terms of ceiling. It's just like Jeff and I talked about previously, and Brian's mentioned it as well, about how the floor from Patrick Surtain is just much higher than J.C. Horn. But Brian, if this is the pick, Cowboys fans should be exceptionally excited, just over the top excited, because this is a player you're going to get that's going to play a long time in the league.
Yeah, you are. You're going to get a player that's going to play an awful long time in the league. And the fact of how competitive he is, it's not just about playing Kyle Pitts, but we've talked about this kid will cover whoever your best receiver is coming off the bus. He is going to take that receiver. And so you have to like the fact that he's willing to go do that. He has a very short memory. If he gives up a play, he's right back at it. All the great corners have that ability to put things in the past and to go forward. We talk about, and I got a discussion this morning with a guy about, they don't make plays on the ball. They don't intercept. Every bit of tape that I've been watching this year, all the ball production for some of these corners have been because of bad throws at the end of half, or a team's down 42-7 and they're just throwing the football. So, if you get your hands on the ball, give me the guy that's going to knock balls down. The turnovers, that's great. But turnovers are either like tip balls, overthrows, or just damn luck. So J.C. Horn, Patrick Surtain, those guys, if you ask me who I think they're going to take, I think they're going to take Surtain. And I'll tell you why they're going to take Surtain. J.C. Horn is going to be gone before they pick.
Wow.
I think J.C. Horn ends up in Carolina. I think J.C. Horn's the first defensive player off the board. I think Carolina takes him at 8, and then I think the Cowboys take Patrick Surtain at number 10, and I think everybody will be just fine with that as well.
I think that's a good point, because who knows? They go a different number of directions. Carolina can. We had them taking Mac Jones. That's probably unlikely at this point now that Sam Darnold's a part of the question. But, hey, J.C. Horn could be in that conversation if they thought he was the best player on their board. Now, Jeff, you're the only one that hasn't given their selection. Who do you think the Cowboys will pick whenever tomorrow night rolls around?
Well, I want us to be right. A collection. And so in honor of that, I just want to cast the net even wider instead of doubling on one of their picks. I will say Rashawn Slater. I just want to cover more ground here. I'm going to go Rashawn Slater.
And why would
Jerry
you do
said
that?
They take left tackles and turn them into all pros. They take left tackles and turn them into all-pro guards. Well, I know who you're talking about when you say that. You're talking about Rashawn Slater. I'm throwing that out there just in case Horn and Serrata are gone. We got to cover more square footage here on the draft show.
Bucky, why would this be a fan? Why would this be a great pick for the Cowboys if Rashawn Slater is the one taking at 10?
Because I think at some point we have to account for Tyron Smith and what he is, and he's an off-injured player who's going to be out of the lineup. If you're going to give your quarterback $40 million, you need to make sure that he's protected. Upgrade the offensive line. If you really pinpoint the issues that the offense had last year, is because they couldn't protect and they couldn't get pushed. Invest in the offensive line. Make sure that the offense is great. Then you can force opponents to chase points. That will help the defense because now the running game is off the table, and now it's about hunting and keeping the ball in front of the defense. You want to be a great team. The way Dallas can be great right away is to make sure that the offense puts up 30, and then they're just able to play bend but don't break defense. You don't need the defense to be great. You just need to be adequate.
You know, I think Bucky makes a great point. It not only helps your quarterback, it helps your running back as well. It helps the offense overall. I do like what Jeff talked about because there could be a scenario that we were saying that you lose both those corners. If all of a sudden Carolina takes a guy and Philadelphia knows that Carolina is going to take that player there, Carolina could go to Detroit and get that other corner.
Yeah.
That if you're a Cowboy fan, you need to be prepared that teams know that you're hunting cornerbacks, and they might say, okay, we got to get ahead of Dallas. And once Carolina knocks off one, or once Philadelphia knocks off one, that whole thing with the offensive lineman scenario is clearly in play for this team.
So many scenarios that are in play, and man, I cannot wait for the draft to finally be here. We're so close. The next time the draft show will be on air, we will all be in studio. Jeff and Brian will be in the building. They'll be down the hall. It's going to be so much fun. I'm so excited for all of this to kind of tune out. Bucky, really quickly, where can everybody find you on night one coverage of the draft?
So night one coverage of the draft, I'll be doing it on Fox Sports Radio. Jay Glazer, myself, LeVar Arrington, and Kevin Burkhardt will be anchoring that coverage. And then I'll be floating. I'll be doing all kinds of other stuff, just talking draft.
There you go, all over the place, big time with Kevin Burkhardt and Jay Glazer. Look at Bucky Brooks. I love it. Maybe you got to put a tie on. I know it's radio, but the tie is certainly something that you need to do. Brian's shaking his head. He knows it as well. He knows.
Nah, Bucky ain't wearing a tie. Bucky ain't wearing a tie. But I'll tell you.
No.
Hey, Bucky. This whole thing, man. Really enjoyed working with you all this time, man. Really appreciate
No, it's been good,
really
Brian.
do.
It's been good.
I appreciate that.
It's been a lot of fun. You too, Jeff. It's been fun having conversations and debates. That's all good. That's the war room.
Honor and a privilege. To you, Kyle.
It's been
not real sure about you yet. We'll figure that out.
That's okay. It's only year 2 for me. I'll figure it out down the road. I guess I'll be okay. We'll be back on. I guess Thursday. Tomorrow, 6 p.m. Central Time is when our coverage starts here on DallasCowboys.com. We will be in studio, wall-to-wall coverage. Man, I cannot wait. But until then, for Chris Beam in the back, for Bucky Brooks, for Jeff Cavanaugh and Brian Broaddus, I'm Kyle Yeoman saying so long. Enjoy draft week, everybody. We'll see you this week on The Draft Show.
This has been a production of DallasCowboys.com and the Dallas Cowboys Football Club.
How about this, Cowboys? Yeah!